like kind of some of that litigation is going to determine, what gets attention, but what are some other ways that tax notes state uses to kind of put things out there, right?
So, I mean, what I certainly have there's a wish list of kind of we use for, editor's wish list of kind of topics that we see coming down the way that we're looking for, say, people who are also interested in that topic writing about. So I certainly keep track of, say, what's kind of going on in the news or what I think might be worthwhile. And also, I have conferences, people, practitioners, LinkedIn. If people write to me and say, I have this, this topic is really big, and in this state, and we really should be talking about it and looking at it. That also, I try to. While I try to be responsive to our readers and to what's going on in the world, I certainly, if somebody thinks there's a topic out there, that doesn't, not to say that every topic that somebody thinks is important, but a lot of times it can be, and a lot of times people on the front lines, they see it first. So certainly. That's I welcome anyone who's looking at something, looking at a topic and going, this should be analyzed, this should be talked about.
Oh, I love that, especially right. We like to hear ourselves talk because I joke about this. We think we're great and we're really smart, so we like to hear ourselves talk. But there are certain things that like we just don't really talk about because that's not really what we rarely ever talk about unclaimed property because that's not the space that we live in. But that doesn't mean that that's not really important, especially in, the Northeast or people in Delaware or, things like that. So I love that you're just open to, hey, if you want to hear about it, let me know. Drop me that note so I can,
yes, absolutely,
make this better for everyone.
Exactly. And, that, I'm as much as much as I try to be aware of everything, I can't be. And as you say, those are, if you're a practitioner in something like unclaimed property, that space. I don't, I know a little bit about that space, but know that space, what's out there. And so I'm always happy to see that and see ideas that way. And if people are willing to write about it, and certainly we read through the submissions to make sure that it's, professional, commentary that can be engaging to our readers. But absolutely, if somebody sees an issue and wants to write about it, I certainly want to at least see it.
Well, so then what would you say kind of are your top top 3 things that you're following or looking at or kind of see some increased volume on discussions in?
I think number one is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and federal actions kind of generally. Even when states may not have a whole lot specifically set out in there are definitely going to be provisions where states may think about conforming, and should they or will they? That's certainly an issue that I think is percolating out there. Also, whenever federal actions impact state revenues, how states have to address that usually, and how they address that is going to have something to do with taxes. Are there going to be tax increases or cutting spending? But cutting spending can also mean getting rid of tax exemptions or tax breaks. So I think a lot of times federal actions impact states even when you don't necessarily see it. So certainly we're looking to see how states handle the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and those provisions. For Me personally, I also think the taxation of digital goods, digital advertising is the tax. You've got the litigation in Maryland that's at the tax court level now. I believe they're looking for a decision from the tax court judge within the year or 6 months from now. I think people are looking to see what happens there. Our state's going to follow Maryland. Are they? And I think the litigation may impact that decision for other states. You have Washington that has just increased their sales, impose their sales tax on digital automated services, which advertising seems to be coming through. So I believe there's litigation in that as well. So, but I think too, just certainly with the fact that there's litigation, that states are there, but also just advertising is I think a big deal for technology now. We're going to new technologies and how people pay for internet activities. Advertising is probably more important than almost ever. So how states treat it is going to be, I think, pretty important.
Well, especially when things evolve, like methods of getting buyers, we'll call it, right? Because that's the whole point of advertising, evolves. Because I remember I had a client one time that when I think Apple kind of changed their privacy security policies, their reach from kind of how they were advertising dropped significantly. And because of those, other government regulations that you wouldn't think about could impact that, right? So then from an ad space, they're trying to think of ways to get around the opt-out or the cookies or all of those other mechanisms that can change just, the taxability or what's happening in just that space that's constantly evolving.
Yes, and how do you determine which state your advertising dollar? It's
the sourcing.
The sourcing
Yep.
is going to be
and
interesting issue with that.
Just defining what advertising is. Just kind of taking that step back and saying, okay, this is advertising or this isn't, and having to understand those definitions on a state-by-state basis.
Yes, and of course the one of the major issues in the Maryland litigation is digital advertising different from print, and how different, and does that matter? Should it matter? Those are all questions that are out there that I think businesses will be impacted on what the answers will be.
Well, and especially too with when you hear, because Maryland came out with the digital ad tax, it seems like forever ago at this point. And you're like, wait a minute, we're still talking about this as like a new hot issue when we heard it originally, but there was just still so much like, will it, won't it, is it, isn't it? And then when you say like, yeah, it's in the tax court right now in Maryland, we might not have a decision for another 6 months and a year. It's like, well, what else is going to come out in the next 6 months or a year that's going to make us forget about the digital ad tax until, it goes through the courts and we have a decision to then kind of like remember like, oh yeah, this is a thing now.
Yes. And although I believe in this one that the judge had originally said that he would try to have a decision out by the end of this year. I just don't know that that's going to happen. They had evidentiary hearings in the summer, but I don't want to suggest. But he has, I think, been on the has said out specifically that he was going to try for end of the year decision. But as you said, this case has gone to the Maryland Supreme Court and gone back down to the tax court. So it's been out there for a while, and we're still here. And presumably, no matter what the tax court decides, it's going to be appealed. I would. I can't speak for any of the parties, but just from how I think important this topic is, I would at least foresee probably being appealed, which adds more time.
Right. And kind of like with Wayfair, right? we've got states that are just kind of sitting idly by, waiting to see what happens with this Maryland tax, to see, okay, are we ready, to enforce ours, right? So, I think that is a hot button issue for all the states and taxpayers to pay attention to.
Yes. I think probably my third one might be a little bit interesting, is the Public Law 86272. So
that one's near and dear to our hearts.
Yes. Yes, it's you certainly have some states, and the Multistate Tax Commission had their updated statement on how it should apply to internet business activities, and certainly there are some states who are, I think, following in their footsteps, and then others who are potentially watching and seeing.
Oh yeah,
and then also you are at least anecdotally, I think I've seen the litigation on PL 86272 issues, not just in those states and not just on that particular topic as far as internet activities, but generally. When are you in the state, and when are you doing business in the state?
Right.
Like how far can you take solicitation? What does that
mean? Yeah.
And so I definitely think that's and then also, I mean, I believe the House version of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act had the expanded language of PL 86272. So I think that it's out there, and not just for the the state tax nerds around us, but everyone. So
we're at that call to action at the federal level, since it is a federal law, to kind of make their position known and change it. Because I think the language that was in the draft version of the One Big Beautiful Bill was also really similar to, I think it was in the House a couple different times last year. I think it still might technically be there.
I believe you're right.
But it hasn't done anything. I think they tried something in 2024, didn't move. I think they tried something in 2025, but that may have gotten stalled because it was in the OBBBBBBBBBA. So, yeah, Stacey and I love 86272.
Well, and after Wayfair, I mean, Meredith and I both do a lot of income tax work and always have, but we're also sales tax, people. And I can say after Wayfair, I mean, I was constantly looking at Public Law 86272 even before Wayfair, but it just wasn't as maybe prevalent until after Wayfair, when suddenly you have all these online retailers that are selling stuff, right? And we're having to say, oh, actually, you may you may not have, a filing requirement, or you may only owe minimums or whatever in these states because you can claim Public Law 86272 protection. And so we have a ton of conversations around that. And then to your point about, the MTC coming out and putting out their expanded interpretation, and, you made the remark about the digital ad tax, right? Where, okay, well, is a print ad the same as a digital ad? And like, an analogy in the Public Law 86272 space for me is, what if customers just picked up the phone as opposed to, going through the interactive website? It's probably a different answer, right? So it's fascinating that, these our states and, our legislatures, and they kind of get all fixated on, a certain way of interacting with customers or, taxpayers, et cetera. And it's like, well, are you shooting yourself in the foot a little bit? Because there's other ways that, companies interact with their customers that might be perfectly fine.
Yeah. I think that's going to be a very big issue kind of going forward, and we'll see where it ends up. But it's definitely on my radar. I think we've seen some commentary on it as well. So it's been.
Well, so then looking ahead, do you see any emerging issues that either maybe you've had a lot of readers kind of reach out to you on that you think you should cover, or just, general kind of topics that you think are going to be maybe the next, I hate this really sounds dumb, but like kind of the next hot topic or the next kind of like Wayfair, digital ad tax, or kind of big thing in state tax, kind of based on your various levels of engagement between, readers, practitioners, all across the board.
I mean, I think it's out there now, but one I think we might see accelerate a bit is the issue of factor representation, especially with more kind of global taxpayers. So, with apportionment, there's kind of an argument that the income that's in the state tax base should also be represented in the apportionment formula. And generally, that would take the form in the denominator, presumably, in which case you would have a lower tax owed. But a lot that's not necessarily how states view that, and I think that. I mean, it came up, I believe, a little bit more. It kind of got with some of the federal legislation, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, with the guilty, and whether states were going to conform, and what does that mean? Repatriation tax as well. You see the Microsoft issue, and so I do think that now that One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which I'm going to say because I can never remember how many B's that is.
Fair.
But I do think that even though that's kind of changed guilty to the new NCTI, I don't know how we're going to pronounce that one.
There's a lot of letters and there's a lot of acronyms, and everyone's going to get it wrong. It's okay. No judgment here. We're a judgment-free zone.
Yes, but I do think that that's raising some questions for states. Both perspectives of should states be conforming, should they not be conforming, if it's and then when you're looking, and do they need to even have factor representation? I think there are definitely arguments on both sides of that issue and that question.
No, I'm glad you said that, because I think it often gets forgotten, and I don't think we've had a lot of conversations about kind of that factor representation, which really goes back to one of just the fundamental accounting principles of just like matching, right? You have income and you have expenses, and then you're supposed to recognize them in some capacity in the same period in which they occur. Right? Why do I get to, and you see this in gain sourcing, right, include a giant gain in my tax base, but I don't get any of that proceeds or gain in my denominator to kind of offset that outlying item of income? Like that doesn't seem right.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought that up, because I think we kind of forget about it until we have to do something with it, and then it makes me mad.
Yeah, I was going to say you have certainly taxpayers, as you said, kind of the matching principle. You also have perspectives, I think, from the state and also some academics that do they need to? Is it actually matching? Or are you trying to match apples and oranges? Are there other ways of handling the issue? You hear some people, combined reporting kind of gets tossed sometimes into that debate space.
Right. Or alternative apportionment, but which is a whole other, process with the states, right? It's not just you can just automatically file a return that way. It's a process to get approved, et cetera, right? So
yes.
Sometimes when you're going, when taxpayers are going through transactions, they're not thinking about that. Right.
Right. And, alternative apportionments, I think kind of in general mix getting, it's also kind of easy heating up and how that works. And how can you prove that you actually are, should qualify for alternative apportionment?
That it's distorted.
It's distorted. And, can you prove it? And,
right.
And then like a separate question, is the state going to accept your proof? So.
Right. Like what's compelling to them, right? Yeah.
And I think, again, we're going to get, as I think I mentioned it earlier, Colorado, because of the One Big Beautiful Bill, had over $1 billion deficit straight away. And because we are a balanced budget state, we have to balance our budget. So some things came part of that discussion. There are going to be other states that are going to have to deal with some of these revenue shortfalls or kind of see, right, as your point number one of things that you watch, federal impact and, cutting direct funding to the states and all of that. Like, states are going to get creative, and is alternative apportionment going to be one of those things? Because I think if not every state, most of them have the opportunity to just be like, well, we can also go in and do whatever we want.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is that going to start coming out and having some of those taxpayers foot the bill for some of those deficits that we're going to see likely in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think, as you say, it all kind of ties together and works hand in hand. So, and states are potentially looking for revenue, and taxpayers are also trying to both, I think, lower tax bills, but also just how do you comply?
Mm-hmm.
It can be burdensome. You've got a number of jurisdictions doing it a number of different ways. Returns can be very interesting, and then especially when you're looking for something like alternative apportionment and proof, a lot of times states are looking for contemporaneous documentation, which, as you say, not every taxpayer is thinking about that at the time that they're doing the transaction. So.
Yeah, so all excellent things to think about. I mean, as we wrap, can you just tell us where, people can find you, how to support the work? Because you said as a nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization that's doing the good work for us tax professionals. Can you just speak to a little bit of just how people can support you?
Absolutely. Our website, taxnotes.com, certainly looking for a subscriber base, but also people who want to write for us. We have a submissions panel there. I'm also available by email. It's andrea.muse@taxanalyst.org. But please reach out to me that way. But as I said, our website is, I think, pretty good for us. It shows a coverage. It shows a wish list, like I said, in submissions panels, and we love our readers, and we hope to get more of them and more writers.
Well, Andrea, thank you so much for your time today on the SALTovation podcast and for the work that you're doing and keeping us all sounding incredibly smart and up to date, and make sure that we know as practitioners what's going on that's going to impact our clients and our industry. So thank you so much for your time and all that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. And it's been, I love, like I said, I love talking about taxes. So it's always fun.
Well, whenever stuff changes, you know where to find us, and we're glad to have you back anytime.
Absolutely. That's right.
Thanks.
Well, that's another episode of SALTovation. Till next time.